Okay, good afternoon. This is Daniel Dauphin with Dauphin Horsemanship, and we had a question or comment, a question in the comments. How about that? I'm articulate today, aren't I? That was a little bit too involved for me to type out in a comment, but I thought it was a very good question and along the lines of a pretty common question that I get. So I thought we'd just sit down and shoot another little video. I apologize for sweating. It is mid-October here in South Louisiana, and we are still hitting like 95 degrees every day. It is the hottest, driest October that I can remember. It's still miserable. Mosquitoes are bad. It's rough. So I apologize for being shiny on camera here. So this is, well, I think that's probably her real name, so I'm not going to say it. But anyway, a user on YouTube has a nice compliment for me, and then she says she's riding a Belgium cross, so he's a very strong horse that's 12 years old. He has only been ridden pleasure in the past and is used to pull logs from what she knows. He is pretty obedient mostly, but sometimes he just starts running for the ring exit if he feels like it. He is a very forward horse, and she states that at the canter she can hardly hold him to a comfortable speed for her. And she has gotten way too much advice on that he should have a stronger bit. She is currently using a snaffle and a French link snaffle. So just so that we're clear on that, I'm assuming when she says snaffle, she means a standard single jointed snaffle. A French link is going to be a double jointed snaffle with the particular lozenge in the middle that makes it a French link. She was suggested to use a snaffle with a twist and or a loose ring instead of an egg butt. She says she knows he still needs a lot of training, and she doesn't want to make his mouth any harder than it already is, but she could use a little bit of help here. She also understands that bits are expensive, and him being a big horse with a wide mouth, she doesn't have just lots of bits that she can borrow from friends, because fitting a wide mouth horse can be kind of difficult to do. It may kind of limit what your selection is in bits. So she's looking for some advice. Pretty darn good question. And I apologize. We are surrounded by horses here in the horse barn. Imagine that. So this is a little bit of a complex question, and I'm going to take a few different tangents, and I've tried to organize a few thoughts here on paper, but you're probably going to get a little bit of a philosophically rambling video here. My apologies on the forefront, but if you want to learn a little bit about philosophy, this is probably going to be a pretty decent video. My suspicion with this horse is that this is a leadership issue. I don't think it's not likely a bit issue, and we will talk about that in a second. But the majority of the time when I hear about a horse that wants to go back to a gate, or he's buddy sour, or he doesn't want to leave the barn, or he won't cross this ditch or whatever, that's a horse that is simply testing the pecking order, and they have found an area where the human fails. And horses, all horses, even the most submissive old 25-year-old grandma that anybody in the world can ride, they test the pecking order. They size people up like that. So my suspicion is that these few signs that we have when this horse is riding are just the most noticeable of the signs. I would bet if I were to watch this lady lead this horse around that I would find some things to pick on that are maybe a little more subtle, a little harder to notice, but are really kind of getting down to the root of the problem. And this is pretty common with people. What we tend to see and we want to fix is the symptom of the problem, but our fix tends to be like a band-aid. It isn't really getting to the root of the infection, which is generally may not even seem related to what we actually see as the symptom. The horse wants to go too fast sometimes. We'll talk about that first. Generally, that's just a green horse. Now I'll say that these drafts and draft crosses are a little bit notorious for this. They can be kind of like a freight train in that they are pretty hard to get going, but once you finally get them going, that momentum kind of builds, and it's like trying to stop a train going downhill. So you having that particular problem with this horse isn't surprising to me at all. The colder natured horses tend to be that way. It takes a good bit to get them going, but once they get going, it takes a good bit to get them stopped. So we'll say, or I'll tell a little story there. I got to meet the guy that, and I've forgotten his name, but pretty good horseman, who was driving the, I think they were Percherons, the 6-horse hitch for, I think, Pryford. Pretty sure it's Pryford was doing it, and he was roaming riding them, and obviously the guy was a heck of a hand. Obviously the horses were all very fit, very well trained, but even that guy admitted that he never got those horses out of a trot, because once they got to galloping, it was just too easy for everything to come apart, and those horses are so big and strong, you cannot just contain them at that point. They're too big. So that may be part of what your problem is with this horse. Green horses, and a 12-year-old can absolutely be a green horse, tend to be the ones that want to go a little too fast, and they haven't ever really learned this lesson. And those type of horses I generally canter a fair bit. One of the things that I like to do is put my cue on them to relax, which we'll cover in another video. But generally horses that want to lope too fast or canter too fast are greener horses that haven't cantered that much, and it's still kind of new and exciting, or maybe their rider's a little timid, so when they finally get to canter, it's like kids at recess. And so probably you just need to canter that horse a good bit and kind of get it out of his system where it's not so new and exciting, and it's kind of a pain. And a big heavy horse like that is going to wear down pretty quickly. Now that may be more than I know it's more than some riders are physically capable of doing. So there's no shame in having someone do that for you, be it a professional. Maybe at the barn you're at, there's a teenager that would love to ride this big, strong, beautiful horse, and they can kind of go wear him out for you for 40 minutes as long as their hands are reasonable and they're not going to do some damage to it. But I would probably just canter that horse a whole lot until he's had some practice and some time to get used to it and is a little more comfortable at it. So let's get into a little bit of the disciplinary side of this. And this is where I know I'm going to get a little hate mail over this, but some people just need to kind of get a life. I'm a bit guy, obviously. I've got these videos on YouTube, and the general premise that the people that would attack me and other bit people is that bits are coercive, they cause pain, they cause discomfort, yada yada yada. And if you haven't seen the rest of my videos, I go over that quite extensively, that bits should be comfortable for a horse. Now that being said, communication is what bits are about, and sometimes you do need to communicate. Every horse within the scope of me riding them, there are multiple times that I would have needed to communicate to them, hey, don't do that again. Hey, pay attention. Come here to me now, right now. Come here. And I need to be saying that through that bit. And it may well be that you are with this big, strong horse, you aren't physically strong enough and capable of biting him enough to kind of get his attention and bring him back. And this is a key thing to understand about horses. The horse chooses the amount of pressure that is needed. It's your job to escalate faithfully, consistently, and predictably, but it is the horse that decides whether you have to go to a 3 or a 4 or a 5 or a 6 or a 7. And a lot of times I see people that they're good-hearted and they don't want to hurt him, but their horse needs them to correct at a level 4, and they're only comfortable going to a level 3, and the horse winds up winning. You have to cross that line. You have to cross his threshold and go to something that he's not willing to do. He's going to be more motivated to go to his buddy or go back to the barn or head to the gate in the arena. You need to do something that motivates him to decide that that's not a good idea. Does not have to be through pain. The vast majority of the time that I correct horses, I'm not even really touching them, particularly in groundwork. I hardly have to touch them at all, just the presence and the way that you go about them. So here's another one of my sayings. Parents who spank don't have to spank. So my wife and I are parents who spank. We really don't have to spank, and I can tell you we travel quite a bit. We go to a lot of shows, and I very consistently get compliments on my sons as to how well mannered they are and stuff. That's because when we lay the law down and we tell them that's enough, it's not a bluff, and they know it. We've enforced it. We've spanked or time-outed or whatever, but there were consequences for those actions consistently. And so when we say stop, it gets heated because we're not bluffing. And a lot of people aren't that way with their horse. I know it's a love relationship and all, but the way that you should really handle horses is the way horses handle horses. And horses that are alpha to the herd, I can see our herd alpha mare's in a stall right over there right now. She does not bluff. When she pins her ears and she tells you to move, she is coming to get you if you don't move. And she doesn't have to go bite horses anymore because they know they get out of her way. A lot of our amateur, non-professional riders just aren't that serious about it, and they kind of let things slide here and there, and next thing you know, they're getting into unsafe areas with their horse because they haven't been a strong enough leader. So you have to figure out where that line is, and you have to be willing to cross it. What typically happens after that, this is the process of sensitizing. Everybody talks about desensitizing. This is the flip side of the coin. This is making a horse more sensitive. Half Belgium, a draft type horse, the cold-natured horses tend to not be very sensitive. So their threshold for that stuff may be much higher than a much more sensitive horse. That's one of the reasons we have to remove our emotions from this stuff sometimes, is that you have to go there. I'll tell a little story here. I just really started working with people here about 5 or 6 years ago, and one of the very first customers that I had was coming from, well, I won't say that identifier, but at any rate, she had a very hard time standing up and becoming firm with a horse. And at that point in time, I had just an old deadhead plug of a great big thoroughbred gelding that just, you could have set off bombs around him and he'd have been standing there with his lip hanging down. And that was the horse that I chose for her to work with, and she had a little dressage whip, and we were doing some just little simple circles with the horse, getting her to turn him away. And I would have her kind of poking him with the butt of the whip in the shoulder so that he would actually move off of her, and consistently she would walk right into him and he wouldn't have gone anywhere. So I finally kind of got her a little bit mad and revved her up enough where she poked him pretty good. And you never really know what people's backgrounds are, but she broke down. I didn't know her very well, and I'm a fairly private to myself sort of a person, but I mean we wound up, she was crying in my arms there in the round pen for about 5 or 10 minutes, and I'm just like, what happened? What did I do here? She really felt like she had gone too far poking that horse, and I mean it hurt her bad. And the reality was, I finally got her calmed down. The horse is standing there asleep. She hadn't gone nearly far enough. So wherever your personal line may be has nothing to do with that horse over there. His line matters. Your line doesn't. As long as you are cerebral about it, You're not emotional, you're not mad, you're not out to teach this son of a gun a lesson or whatever. As long as you are just being consistent and predictable and escalating the aid until you're fine. You're not in an abusive area. It's when people get emotional and they get mad and they kind of lose it, that's when the abuse type stuff happens. But quite frankly, like working with these big draft horses, I mean, this mare that we've got here, half Belgium, half thoroughbred mare, she's 1,800 pounds. The reality is, even I'm a 225 pound man and I'm a fairly strong guy. There is nothing that I can physically do to that horse other than kick her in a knee against a joint or poke her in an eye that could actually hurt her. Nothing that I could do. I could pound on her ribs, knee in her belly, kick her in her belly, whatever. You know, not that I'm advocating that you go do that, but the reality is I've got a 500-pound Shetland pony out here that can kick on and beat and physically hurt that mare way more than I possibly can. Sometimes we kind of have to understand that. You want to be as gentle as you can be, but you have to be as firm as is necessary. And this stuff can certainly get dangerous. Again, you're working with a 1,000-pound, 2,000-pound animal here. You can get crunched and beat up and hurt pretty badly just for not stepping up there like you need to. So where this brings us with bits. Again, as I just said, you may well be physically incapable of pulling on a snaffle bit hard enough to reach your horse's threshold where he needs to, he's going to make a decision to come back to you rather than fighting through that pressure. And so a bit that's got a little more bite to it, and it may be a twisted wire snaffle, it may be some sort of shank bit. I mean, frankly, there are lots of options there. All you need to do is kind of turn the fire up until how you turn the fire up isn't what really matters. Now, one of the key things why I would be willing to do this to this horse is because this is a disciplinary issue. It's really not a training issue or a teaching issue. So to me, the difference is a teaching issue is when a horse does not understand what I want. It would be like a horse that doesn't want to, has a fear issue and doesn't want to load in the trailer. Well, me beating him into the trailer and using more fear is not a good way to go about that. But if a horse completely understands what it is that I want and he's just kind of being a turd, that is a disciplinary issue. That is not a behavioral or teaching issue. Now it does become a who has the bigger stick, where is the motivation. And frankly, that just does occur. It may not occur much, and once you've fought and won a couple of those battles, their desire to fight you or test you or however you want to put it is going to go way, way down. But if you lose a couple of those battles, in the horse's mind, they're going to become more emboldened to fight you. They're going to, the pecking order has reversed. They now are the leader and you're at their mercy and their whim. Not a good place to be. Again, I'm not seeing this lady ride the horse. I don't know. This is just my suspicion, but a stronger bit may well help you through this if you're going to not have the stomach to just canter that horse around until it gives up again. Either way, you have to push that horse to a place that it doesn't want to go again, and then it's going to turn and kind of come back to you. But the driving, the pushing, the putting the pressure on is universal, and this is a very standard thing. This is what I would consider to be very basic horsemanship. Let me see if I have forgotten anything here. Well, I'll bring this up. When we talk about basic horsemanship, the presence that you have as a horseman is something that horses will just pick up on very readily. it's a little bit of a frustrating sort of a thing, but I can tell you, as I do clinics and expos and things, and you have people bring you a problem horse, it is not at all uncommon that they hand me the horse and I work with them for literally a matter of seconds. And just the presence of the way that I step to them and back them off and all, I now can't replicate the problem. That horse won't do to me what it was just doing to that person seconds ago. And I'll give you an example of that. There's a dog trainer that I know, and he has got this old ram in his sheep flock that he uses to test whether a dog is going to be strong enough and hardy enough to be a good dog. And I've seen this done a dozen times. It impresses me every time. But that ram is a great judge of whether a dog really will bite or it won't bite. They can walk up there, and I've seen dogs, they get 5 or 6 feet away nose to nose, and that ram will start backing up. And he never really turns his butt to him, but he doesn't want to fight. He backs up and gives ground. And I've seen other dogs that walk up to him 5 feet away, and he comes walking forward and he drives the dog back. He can immediately tell what the constitution of that dog is. And horses read us just exactly the same way. So if you have a horse that is constantly challenging you, that's a very basic leadership issue, and the biggest thing that you need to do is find where that horse's line is and cross it, and do it repeatedly. One of the things that I don't see done with groundwork enough, there are a lot of horses that once we've kind of got those basics, a few days of groundwork on them, really the only thing I'm looking to do after that with groundwork is to find some excuse to kind of push and pick on that horse a little bit and just back him off of me. And once I've done that, now we can go on and have a nice day. You can absolutely do groundwork incorrectly for 30 or 40 minutes, and that horse in his mind backed you up the whole time, and your ride's now going to be much worse than what it would have been before. So might you need a stronger bit? Again, getting into the whether you're physically capable of getting to that line, you might. I hate to say that, but it just kind of is the reality of it. This is not somewhere that I would go with a child. Again, we had that cerebral decision. We need someone who has decision-making skills and control of themselves before we put something. I mean, we certainly wouldn't want some little tiny twisted wire that could cut a horse's tongue, and then we got a 12-year-old kid up there sawing on that thing. I mean, that's a bad deal. But you know, something with some shanks and a little more bite to it may well solve your problem. And it's not necessarily something you'd have to ride with for forever. Again, it's a sensitizing process. Once you've crossed that horse's line, that line starts coming in and getting closer and closer and closer, hence the sensitizing. It gets easier to get to that line and cross it over time. That's what we're doing as trainers for the most part, once we've gotten past the basics of desensitizing. And when we're out there riding and we're softening a horse to the left, or we're getting them off of our leg where they'll side pass or whatever, that's all the sensitizing process. That is increasing pressure until the horse yields. Very simple, very basic concept. It is classical negative reinforcement is what it is. So again, I hope that wasn't too much of a rant or a rambling philosophical deal, but those are some of my thoughts on this situation. Please like and subscribe our channel. Check out our website. We've got a subscription side to it now, where there are blogs and videos and things that are not available to the general public. And in fact, we're going to be starting a filly here before long, and putting her entire first year on there for the subscribers to watch and really kind of see that whole process. So anyway, Daniel Dauphin with Dauphin Horsemanship. If y'all have any other comments, things like that, different bits, what my views on them, feel free to email me or post something in the comments. I try to get to most of the questions that are asked. So anyway, thank y'all much. Have a blessed day. Take care.